History tells us stories of kings, conquerors, and emperors whose names echo through the centuries. We learn of Caesar in Rome, Alexander the Great in Greece, and Napoleon in France. Their legacies are carved into monuments, written in books, and repeated in classrooms. But there is another story, a story buried under centuries of silence. A story about a queen so powerful, so brilliant, and so beloved by her people that her very existence threatened the narrative of those who sought to dominate and erase. This queen was not European. She was African. She was black. And unlike many monarchs whose stories survived through ink and paper, hers was deliberately torn out of history books, left to fade in whispers passed down by grandmothers, griots, and storytellers who refused to let her spirit die. Imagine this. A woman draped in robes of deep indigo, the fabric woven by her people's skilled hands, embroidered with gold dust collected from the riverbanks of her kingdom. She walks through a palace of carved stone and sun-baked clay, where the walls tell stories in hieroglyphs, in symbols, in colors too vibrant for time to dim. She carries herself with the authority of a ruler, but the warmth of a mother. Her subjects bow their heads in respect, not in fear. Her power does not rest on cruelty, but on wisdom, courage, and the unshakable knowledge of who she is. She ruled at a time when kingdoms flourished across Africa, long before colonial lines were drawn on maps. She protected her people against invaders, expanded trade routes that connected deserts to seas, and built alliances that outlasted generations. Under her reign, culture thrived, justice was upheld, and her kingdom stood as a beacon of strength. But then silence. No monuments of her remain. No royal scrolls preserved her name. No grand statue towers to honor her. Instead, her story exists in fragments, whispers of a queen erased because her existence contradicted a narrative that Africa had no greatness before colonizers arrived. Her power was a danger. Her story was proof that black women once ruled with authority, respect, and unmatched brilliance. And so, history's keepers chose to bury her. But buried doesn't mean forgotten. Across villages and cities, in the voices of elders and the songs of griots, her memory flickered like a candle refusing to go out. They told of a queen who stood taller than her oppressors, who carried her people through storms, who made even her enemies bow in reluctant respect. So who was she? Why did the world conspire to erase her? And why is it that only now, centuries later, her name begins to rise again like the sun that can never be hidden forever? This is her story. The story of the forgotten black queen who ruled before history erased her name. But be warned, this is not just history. This is a mirror, a reflection of how power silences truth, a reminder of how easily greatness can be erased, and how necessary it is to reclaim it. Because her story is not only about the past, it's about identity, it's about resilience, it's about refusing to let erasure define us. And by the time we reach the end, you will not only know her story, you will feel her presence, her pride, and her unbreakable spirit. Her name may have been buried, but her legacy lives. Long before the world knew her as a ruler, she was a child of destiny, born beneath the golden skies of a kingdom flourishing with abundance and culture. Her people believed that every child was a gift from the ancestors, but from the moment of her birth, whispers spread that this child was different. Her mother, a respected noblewoman, dreamt of a falcon hovering above her newborn daughter, wings stretched wide, eyes unblinking. In her culture, the falcon was a symbol of protection, foresight, and leadership. Elders who heard of the dream nodded knowingly. They believed the ancestors had chosen this child for greatness. The kingdom into which she was born thrived on the banks of a mighty river. Its waters carried more than fish and fertile soil. They carried gold dust, ivory, and the promise of trade. Merchants from across deserts and oceans came to exchange goods, spices from Arabia, silks from Asia, and treasures from beyond the seas. Her homeland was not a place of poverty, as later tales would wrongly suggest, but a hub of wealth, knowledge, and power. From an early age, the young girl, let us call her Queen Nyra, showed qualities far beyond her years. While other children played with carved dolls or chased each other across dusty courtyards, Nyra sat beside griots, the storytellers of her people. She listened to legends of warriors who defended the land, queens who commanded armies, and spirits who watched over the living. Unlike most children, She had not just listened, she remembered. She repeated stories word for word, her young voice rising in confidence as though she had lived them herself. Her curiosity knew no bounds. When her tutors taught her to count cowrie shells and tally trade goods, she demanded to know the routes merchants traveled. When priests spoke of the gods, she asked why some stars never moved from the night sky. She learned quickly, absorbing knowledge like the soil absorbs rain. By the age of 10, Nyra could read the sacred carvings etched into temple walls and speak to foreign traders in their own tongues. But her childhood was not free of shadows. Beyond the borders of her flourishing kingdom lurked threats: raiders who sought to steal wealth, rival rulers jealous of her land's prosperity, and foreign emissaries who came smiling but left with secrets. Nyra saw these dangers long before most adults would acknowledge them. Once, when visiting the marketplace with her mother, she overheard two traders whispering about outsiders plotting to weaken the kingdom by sowing division. While others dismissed her as a child with a vivid imagination, Nyra's mother listened. And time proved the girl right. Her wisdom earned her both admiration and unease. Some nobles feared her sharp mind, worried it would disrupt the old order. "A girl should not ask so many questions," one elder muttered during a council, but her mother silenced him with a single look, replying, "Perhaps it is not the girl who asks too much, but the rest of us who think too little." As Nyra grew into adolescence, her spirit only burned brighter. She trained in the arts of diplomacy, learning how to mediate disputes among rival clans. She studied the strategies of generals, drawing maps in the sand to plan defenses against invaders. And though she was not expected to fight, she practiced with spear and bow, declaring, "A ruler must understand the strength she commands." By the time she reached 16, Nyra was already walking the shadow of destiny. Her presence commanded attention in the royal court. Her voice, though still youthful, carried the weight of truth. She spoke of unity, of the importance of protecting not just the nobility but also the farmers, the artisans, the traders, and the poor. Her people began to whisper her as a leader before she ever sat on a throne. Then came the moment that sealed her path. One night, the kingdom was attacked. Raiders descended on villages at the edge of the realm, burning homes and stealing livestock. Panic spread quickly, and the royal council hesitated, arguing over the best response. But Nyra, just a teenager, stepped forward. She urged immediate action, insisting they send riders to warn neighboring towns and dispatch soldiers before the raiders advanced further. The king hesitated, until Nyra herself rode into the night with a small band of guards. Her courage inspired others. Soldiers rallied behind her, villagers offered shelter, and within days the raiders were driven back. When she returned, the people cheered not only because they were safe, but because they saw in her the heart of a true queen. The elders who once doubted her whispered among themselves, "Perhaps the ancestors really did choose her." From that day on, Nyra was no longer just a king's daughter. She was the beacon of her people, the living embodiment of their resilience and hope. She was destined for a throne that history would later try to deny her, but which, in her time, shone with undeniable brilliance. The morning after her triumphant return from the borderlands, Nyra woke to a kingdom changed. The people no longer looked at her as a child of privilege. They looked at her as their protector. Yet with admiration came expectation. Whispers followed her through the courtyards and marketplaces. "She is the one who will lead us," they said. But for every cheer, there was also doubt. The royal council sat in uneasy silence as Nyra entered the chamber one evening. Their golden robes reflected the firelight, but their faces revealed discomfort. Some feared she would disrupt the delicate balance of power. Others questioned the boldness of her ideas. The kingdom was strong, yes, but strength always attracted envy, and envy, she knew, was already sharpening its claws. The letter from the desert. News soon arrived of a neighboring ruler, King Darius, who commanded a desert empire across the western sands. He had always kept his distance, content with his own trade routes and armies. But now, messengers came bearing his demands, tribute in gold and ivory or face invasion. The council, rattled by recent raids, leaned toward compromise. "We must avoid war at all costs," one elder urged. "Pay him, and he will leave us in peace." Nyra, barely 17, stood tall and refused. If we bend once, we will bend forever. Today it is gold, tomorrow it will be our people. Her words rang through the chamber like a drumbeat. For the first time, even her most doubtful critics found themselves listening. The first test of leadership. Nyra proposed a bold plan. Fortify the kingdom's borders, strengthen alliances with smaller clans, and secure the river trade routes that sustained their wealth. She knew King Darius sought not just riches, but also control the waters that fed her people. To prove her resolve, Nyra led a delegation herself. She rode to the riverfront, where fishermen cast their nets and merchants unloaded goods. She spoke to them not as royalty, but as one of their own. This river is our lifeblood, she declared. As long as it flows, so shall our freedom. But if we surrender it, we surrender everything. The people rallied. Farmers volunteered their carts, artisans forged weapons, and young men pledged to defend the riverbanks. Nyra's charisma turned fear into determination, betrayal within. But shadows lingered even closer than the desert king. Among her own council sat Richardus, a noble with ambitions of his own. He resented Nyra's growing influence, believing leadership should remain firmly in the hands of men. He began whispering poison into the ears of other nobles, claiming Nyra's defiance would bring ruin. One night, Nyra overheard his plot. She found him in a secluded garden, speaking to a foreign emissary under the cover of darkness. He promised to deliver secrets of the kingdom's defenses in exchange for riches and power once King Darius invaded. Nyra's heart burned with fury, but also clarity. She realized her greatest threat was not always from beyond the borders, but from within. She chose silence, biding her time. She knew exposing him too soon could fracture the council. Instead, she began gathering proof, quietly winning allies who believed in her vision. The clash at the river. Tensions erupted weeks later. King Darius, growing impatient, sent raiders across the desert to test her defenses. Smoke rose over villages, and cries echoed through the night. Nyra did not wait for the council's approval. She led an army herself, riding at the front, her spear glinting in the dawn. The battle at the river was fierce. The enemy sought to cross with fire and steel, but Nyra's strategy proved decisive. She had ordered trenches dug along the banks, hidden with reeds, and when invaders charged, their horses stumbled, their ranks broken. Her soldiers surged forward with renewed courage, striking with precision. Nyra fought among them, her presence igniting their spirits. To see a princess wielding a weapon beside them was more powerful than any order barked from the rear. By nightfall, the raiders were scattered, their bodies retreating with the current of the river they had failed to claim. A queen in all but name, the victory cemented Nyra's place in the hearts of her people. Villagers chanted her name, artisans carved her likeness into wood, and mothers told their children stories of the princess who fought like a lioness. Yet the council remained divided. Some praised her brilliance, while others clung to tradition. She is young, they warned. She is a woman. The ancestors will frown upon this. But when Nyra entered the marketplace, when she knelt beside the wounded, when she clasped hands with grieving mothers, there was no doubt in the eyes of the people. She was their leader. She was their queen, even if no crown yet adorned her head, the unseen enemy. But Richardus had not forgotten his betrayal, nor had King Darius abandoned his ambitions. Though defeated, he withdrew only to regroup, promising vengeance. And within Nyra's own palace, her rival waited like a coiled serpent, ready to strike when she least expected. For now, though Nyra stood victorious, she had faced her first great challenge and emerged stronger, but she knew the shadows were deepening. Her destiny was only beginning to unfold. And as she looked out over the river that shimmered beneath the moonlight, she whispered to herself, "They may try to erase me, but they will never silence me." Victory at the river had transformed Princess Nyra in the eyes of her people. No longer was she just a young woman who asked too many questions in the council chambers. She was a warrior, a strategist, and, in the hearts of many, already a queen. Yet even as songs of her triumph filled the air, darkness festered within the palace walls. Shadows in the council. The royal council gathered days after battle. Incense burned. the scent of frankincense mingling with the polished wood of the chamber. Nyra stood proudly among the elders, representing plans for strengthening defenses and forging new alliances. But she felt the weight of eyes upon her, some admiring, others sharp with resentment. Richardus, the noble who had secretly conspired with the Desert King, wore a mask of respect. He applauded her victory in public, even bowing slightly when she entered the chamber. But behind his thin smile, venom dripped. To him, every cheer for Nyra was another nail sealing the coffin of his own ambitions. When Nyra spoke of sending envoys to neighboring kingdoms, Richardus interrupted with false concern. "Your Highness, you are young and brave, yes, but the work of diplomacy is delicate. A misstep could invite more enemies than friends. Perhaps it is best left to those of us with experience." The council murmured in agreement. Nyra held her tongue, masking her frustration. She knew he sought to discredit her, to reduce her to a mere figurehead while others seized control. The poisoned rumors. Soon, whispers spread through the palace corridors. Servants muttered of Nyra's recklessness. Nobles claimed she sought to usurp her own father's throne prematurely. Some even suggested she had bewitched the people with sorcery to win their loyalty. Richardus fed these rumors carefully, never openly accusing, always allowing doubt to fester. He arranged feasts where wine flowed freely, then planted seeds of mistrust in drunken ears. "Did you hear how she defied the council?" he would say. "Whatever pride leads us all to ruin." Nyra noticed a shift. Once warm smiles from certain nobles became cold nods. Allies who had praised her bravery grew hesitant. Trust, she realized, was as fragile as glass. One crack, and it could shatter completely. The discovery. One evening, as Nyra walked to the archives of the palace, she stumbled upon a piece of parchment tucked between trade records. It bore a strange seal, the same emblem she had seen on the emissary Richardus once spoke with in secret. The document was a letter promising land and gold in exchange for aiding an invasion. Her suspicions hardened into certainty. Richardus was a traitor. But proof alone was not enough. If she accused him without careful strategy, the council might side with him. After all, he was older, wealthy, and well-connected. Nyra realized she faced not just a battle of armies, but a battle of perception. She needed to win the hearts of the council as surely as she had won the hearts of the people. A dangerous gambit. Nyra devised a plan. During the next council meeting, she proposed a festival in honor of the ancestors, a gathering of nobles, soldiers, and common folk alike. She insisted Richardus oversee its organization, flattering his ego. Suspicious yet unable to refuse, he agreed. The night of the festival, the kingdom pulsed with life. Drums thundered, dancers twirled, and the scent of roasted meats filled the air. Nobles reclined on cushions, laughing and drinking, while commoners mingled freely, a rare moment of unity. But Nyra had arranged more than celebration. She had secretly sent loyal guards to search Richardus's chambers while he entertained guests. What they found was damning. Letters sealed with foreign crests, detailing strategies to weaken the kingdom's defenses. The confrontation. At the height of the festival, Nyra stood before the crowd. Her voice rang clear above the music. "Tonight, we honor our ancestors, who taught us that unity is our greatest strength. Yet among us walks one who seeks not unity, but division, one who would sell our land and our people for his own gain." Gasps echoed. Richardus froze, wine cup in hand. He tried to laugh it off. "Childish accusations," he sneered. "Do you dare dishonor a noble in front of his people?" Nyra lifted the parchment high. The guards brought forth chest after chest of evidence, letters, maps, agreements signed in his name. The crowd erupted in outrage. For a moment, Richardus's mask slipped, his face twisted with fury. "Fools," he roared. "Do you think a girl can protect you from the world's hunger? When the invaders come, you will beg for men like me." But the people did not beg. They shouted his name in scorn, demanding justice. Judgment. The council had no choice. Judge Williams, the eldest of the council, declared Richardus guilty of treason. His lands were seized, his title stripped, and he was cast into exile. Some whispered he would not survive long beyond the borders. As the guards led him away, his eyes locked with Nyra's. "This is not the end," he hissed. "Others will rise. And when they do, your name will be forgotten." But Nyra did not flinch. "My name lives in the hearts of my people. It will outlast your greed." A hard lesson. The betrayal left scars. Nyra had proven her cunning, but she also understood the dangers more deeply than ever. Enemies did not always wear foreign armor. Sometimes they sat across the council table, smiling as they sharpened knives behind their backs. Still, the victory was hers. The people's faith in her only deepened. The council, though reluctant, began to see that she was not a passing shadow of fortune. She was a leader born for times such as these. And yet, beyond the horizon, King Darius gathered his forces once more. Richardus's words lingered like a warning. Others will rise. For now, though, Nyra walked among her people, their cheers echoing like a promise. Betrayal had tested her, but it had also tempered her spirit. She was no longer merely a princess of promise. She was becoming a queen forged in fire. The fall of Richardus had shaken the palace, but beyond the walls of the kingdom, King Darius seethed. The Desert King had counted on Richardus's betrayal to weaken Nyra's homeland from within. With that hope crushed, he turned to open war. The gathering storm. Messengers rode hard across the sands, bringing reports of vast armies assembling under Darius's banner. Thousands of soldiers, armored in bronze and leather, marched across the dunes. War drums pounded, carrying across the desert wind. His ambition was no longer hidden. He intended to conquer the river kingdom, seize its trade, and enslave its people. The royal council trembled. Some still urged diplomacy, terrified of Darius's numbers. "We cannot match his might," one elder fretted. "To resist is to invite destruction." But Nyra stood unmoved. "If we surrender," she declared, "we will no longer be a kingdom. We will be slaves." Her words silenced the chamber. She had faced betrayal, raids, and doubt before. Now, she would face the storm head-on, preparing the kingdom. Nyra wasted no time. She called upon her people not just as soldiers, but as builders, strategists, and innovators. Carpenters constructed barricades along the river. Blacksmiths forged new weapons day and night. Farmers stored grain in hidden cellars, preparing for siege. More importantly, Nyra turned to alliances. Smaller clans in neighboring villages who once kept their distance now answered her call. They had heard of her victories, her fairness, and her courage. They pledged their warriors and provisions, swearing loyalty not just to the throne, but to Nyra herself. The river kingdom became a fortress. But Nyra knew walls and weapons alone would not defeat Darius. To win, she would need cunning. A queen's gambit. Nyra studied the maps of the desert, tracing the paths of Darius's armies. She understood his greatest weakness, water. His men could not survive long marches without it. The desert was both his shield and his curse. She devised a plan that stunned even her closest advisors. Instead of waiting behind her walls, she would strike first, deep in the desert. Meet him where he is strongest? Her generals questioned. "No," Nyra replied. "Meet him where he is most vulnerable." Under cover of night, small bands of riders set out. They moved swiftly, targeting wells and supply caravans. They lit no fires, spoke no words. One by one, Darius's lifelines vanished. His vast army began to thirst. The desert clash. When Darius finally reached the river, his men were weary, parched, and demoralized. Still, their numbers were overwhelming, and the battle that followed shook the land. Nyra rode at the head of her forces, spear in hand, her presence blazing like the sun itself. Her soldiers fought with the knowledge that they defended not just land, but their very freedom. The clash was brutal. Dust filled the air, arrows darkened the sky, and the cries of warriors echoed for miles. Nyra's forces used the terrain to their advantage, luring Darius's men into narrow passes and ambushing them with precision. At one critical moment, when the enemy surged dangerously close to breaking her lines, Nyra herself rode forward. She raised her spear high, rallying her soldiers. "The river is ours," she cried. "Let it flow with freedom, not chains." Her words ignited her troops. They surged with renewed fury, driving Darius's weary men back. The Duel of Wills. Amid the chaos, Nyra and Darius finally face one another. The Desert King, towering and armored in gold, sneered at the sight of a young woman leading an army. "You dare defy me," he roared. "Your kingdom will be dust beneath my feet." Nyra's gaze was steady. "Then you will drown in that dust, for we are not yours to claim." Their duel was fierce. Spear against sword, strategy against brute force. Darius fought with the arrogance of one who believed victory was his birthright. Nyra fought with the fire of one who knew defeat meant annihilation. In the end, it was not just her strength, but her foresight that prevailed. Exhausted and enraged, Darius stumbled, his sword striking sand where her spear had already struck true. He fell, not just man defeated, but an empire's ambition undone. Victory at the river. As word spread of Darius's fall, his army broke. Soldiers dropped their weapons, fleeing back into the desert. The river kingdom stood victorious. The battlefield, though stained with blood, shimmered with the cries of triumph. Nyra's people lifted her upon their shoulders, chanting her name. For them, she was no longer merely the daughter of royalty. She was their savior, their protector, their queen. Shadows of tomorrow. Yet Nyra herself felt no triumph in her heart. She looked upon the fallen, both her own and the enemy's, and felt the weight of every life lost. She had won a war, but she knew more battles awaited. Envy and greed would not vanish with Darius. Other rulers would rise, other betrayals would fester. Still, as she stood by the river that flowed red with sacrifice, she knew one truth. History could never erase what she had achieved. Her people would remember her not only as the queen who defended them, but as the queen who taught them resilience, unity, and the strength of their own voices. The war drums had fallen silent. The smoke of battle drifted away, leaving the scent of iron and dust in the air. The kingdom had survived, but its heart was weary. Families mourned their lost sons. Mothers clutched children tightly, and the river carried offerings for the spirits of the fallen. Nyra walked through the healing city, no longer the uncertain princess who once trembled beneath the weight of a throne. She was a warrior who had defied a desert king, the leader who had held her people together in the darkest hour. Still, a heaviness lingered in her chest. Victory had not erased suffering. The wounds of war remained. It was in this fragile moment that the council and the people declared what was already truth in their hearts. Nyra was no longer merely their ruler by blood. She had become their queen by fire. The coronation. The day of Nyra's coronation was unlike any the kingdom had ever seen. The palace gates were thrown open, inviting not just nobles but farmers, merchants, and warriors who had fought beside her. The people flooded the courtyards, their voices rising in chants that echoed across the riverbanks. The high priest placed upon her brow not a golden crown, but a circlet of woven bronze and polished river stones, a symbol of the land itself, forged by hands of artisans rather than royal jewelers. It was called the crown of fire, for it was born in the furnaces that armed her people and lit their path to victory. When Nyra rose to her feet, the cheers shook the heavens. Her name was no longer whispered with doubt or overshadowed by betrayal. It was roared with pride. Queen Nyra, Queen of the River, Mother of Freedom. But even in this moment of triumph, she knew the crown was not just a symbol of honor. It was a burden, a promise, and a trial yet to come. The test of unity. Soon after her coronation, whispers began to circulate. The kingdom had been united in war, but peace revealed old divisions. Merchants clashed with farmers over trade routes. Nobles complained that commoners had been given too much voice in the council. Some even claimed the crown had made Nyra too bold, too willing to blur the lines between ruler and ruled. Nyra faced these challenges with the same resolve she had shown on the battlefield. She opened the council to representatives from villages that had never been heard before. She ordered new schools to be built, insisting that children, girls and boys alike, would learn the skills to shape their future. To the nobles who resisted, she said simply, "The kingdom is not yours to own. It belongs to those who bleed for it, who build it, who live upon its soil." Her reforms were radical, and not all welcomed them. But to the farmers, the laborers, and the women who had long been overlooked, she became more than a queen. She became a symbol of possibility. The foreign envoys, News of Nyra's victory and coronation spread far beyond the river's edge. Traders carried tales of the Black Queen who had defeated the Desert King and crowned herself in fire. Soon, envoys arrived from distant lands. Some came with gifts, gold, ivory, spices, seeking alliances. Others came with veiled threats, warning that Nyra's growing power would not go uncontested. Among them was an envoy from a distant empire across the sea. With honeyed words, he praised her wisdom and strength, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. He spoke of trade but hinted at domination, of partnership but implied submission. Nyra listened patiently, then dismissed him with a single statement. "We are not for sale. Our crown was not given by empires, and it will not be taken by them." The envoy left in silence, but Nyra knew this was only the beginning. Her crown of fire had drawn not only admiration but envy, the shadow of betrayal. Even within her court, danger still lingered. Some nobles, stripped of the unchecked power they once enjoyed, began plotting in the shadows. They whispered that Nyra had gone too far, that she was no longer a queen but a tyrant disguised as a liberator. One night, a trusted guard uncovered a conspiracy. Poison had been smuggled into the palace kitchens, meant for Nyra's cup. The conspirators were seized, their scheme exposed. When brought before her, the ringleader sneered. "You think you are different," he spat. "But queens rise and queens fall. Your name will fade like all the rest." Nyra's gaze was cold but unshaken. "Perhaps," she replied, "but while I live, my people know freedom. And freedom cannot be poisoned." The conspirators were banished, stripped of land and titles. It was a warning to others who would test her resolve. The burden of the crown. Despite her strength, Nyra sometimes felt the weight of her crown press harder than any spear. At night, she would walk the palace gardens alone, listening to the river's endless flow. She wondered if history would honor her, or if envious rulers and bitter enemies would one day bury her name in silence. But when doubt crept too close, she remembered the faces of her people, the children in schools she built, the mothers who no longer feared chains, the farmers who tilled their land free of conquest. It was for them, not for history, that she bore the crown of fire, legacy forged in fire. Under Nyra's reign, the river kingdom blossomed. Trade flourished, but not at the cost of dignity. Knowledge spread like sunlight, touching corners of the realm that had once been forgotten. Women found voices in the marketplace and the council. Warriors who had once fought under divided banners now stood as one people. Her enemies might conspire, foreign empires might scheme, but within her borders she had created something unbreakable: unity. And as she stood upon the palace balcony, watching her people celebrate the harvest, she knew the truth of her crown. It was not a crown of gold, nor of jewels. It was a crown forged in fire, in sacrifice, in resilience. It was a crown that belonged not just to her, but to her people. For as long as they remembered her, history itself could never erase her. Years passed, and the kingdom thrived beneath Queen Nyra's reign. Markets bustled with color and song. Schools rang with the laughter of children, and women walked the streets with new pride in their steps. She had not merely defended her people, she had reshaped their future. But even queens cannot escape the march of time. Nyra, once the fierce warrior of 28 summers, now felt the slow ache in her bones. Silver threaded through her curls, and though her eyes remained sharp, they carried the weight of countless trials. One evening, she gathered her council and her mother by her side. "The crown of fire is not mine to keep forever," she said quietly. "It must pass to hands unafraid to carry its weight." Her words silenced the chamber, for none wished to imagine their queen stepping aside. Yet Nyra knew better than most that leadership was not about clinging to power. It was about ensuring the flame continued to burn, even when her own light dimmed. The final trial. Not long after, fate tested her one last time. Rumors spread that a vast empire to the north sought to expand, and Nyra's kingdom lay directly in their path. Some feared this enemy would succeed, where the Desert King had failed. The council urged her to prepare for war. But Nyra, older and wiser, saw a different path. Instead of sharpening swords, she sharpened words. She sent envoys not with weapons, but with gifts of grain, water, and knowledge. She invited the empire's rulers to her city, showing them a land not of conquest, but of strength rooted in unity. When they saw her people, educated, disciplined, thriving, they hesitated. This was no fractured land waiting to be devoured. This was a kingdom alive with purpose. The empire withdrew, and with that, Nyra's final trial ended not with blood, but with diplomacy. The sunset years. In her later years, Nyra became less a ruler and more a teacher. She spent hours in the schools she had built, speaking to children about courage, justice, and the power of knowledge. She walked the field with farmers, blessing their harvests. She sat with mothers and elders, listening to their stories. The people began to call her not just Queen of the River, but Mother of Nations. Her face appeared on woven tapestries and carved on temple walls. Songs told of her victories, her reforms, her compassion. And yet, deep within, she feared what she had feared since her coronation. That one day, history's jealous hand might try to erase her. The Queen's death. When Nyra passed away, the entire kingdom mourned as one. Bells tolled in every village. Fires were lit on mountaintops, their flames stretching toward the stars. Tens of thousands walked the roads to her capital, carrying offerings of flowers, carved wooden crowns, and letters of gratitude. She was laid to rest not in a golden tomb, but in the earth beside the river that had always given life to her people. Upon her grave, they placed a crown of fire, not buried, but raised upon a stone pillar, so that all who passed would see it and remember. Her mother, Evelyn, whispered through her tears, "The river will never forget you, child, and neither will we." The silence of history. But time is both guardian and thief. As centuries passed, empires rose and fell. Conquerors rewrote maps. Foreign scribes recorded kings' names while omitting queens they could not understand or refuse to honor. Nyra's story, once sung in marketplaces and inscribed on walls, faded into whispers. Scrolls were burned. Statues were broken. By the time new historians looked upon the ruins of her kingdom, only fragments remained. A broken crown, a few verses of song, a river that still flowed where she once stood. And so the world nearly forgot. The rediscovery. Centuries later, scholars digging near the river uncovered something extraordinary. Beneath layers of earth and stone, they found a weathered tablet. Carved into it were words that defied erasure. She bore the crown of fire, not for herself, but for her people. Her name was Nyra, Queen of the River, Mother of Freedom. The discovery sent ripples across the academic world. Who was this queen erased from the scrolls of history? How had her story disappeared while lesser rulers were remembered? Soon, more fragments emerged, artifacts, songs, inscriptions, all painting a portrait of a woman whose reign had shaped a kingdom. And slowly, the world began to remember the eternal legacy. Today, Queen Nyra's story is told not only in the land she once ruled, but across oceans and continents. She has become a symbol for those whose voices have been silenced, for women whose names were erased, for people who fought oppression only to be forgotten by history's pen. Her legacy lives in classrooms where her name is spoken once again. It lives in murals painted by children who see themselves in her strength. It lives in hearts of all who know that even when the world tries to erase you, the truth will always rise. For the river still flows, and in its waters her spirit endures. Queen Nyra, forgotten once, but never again.